All right, good day everyone, and welcome to today's Accendo Reliability webinar. We're going to talk a little bit about reliability education and basically the many different ways that education has stayed the same and has changed over time so that we've got a lot of different opportunities today to support becoming and engaging as a reliability professional. So just one last sound check here. Let's if somebody could let me know if my audio is coming through. I think I've got all the buttons pushed correctly. And while I'm on this screen, I want to point over to the lower right-hand corner. There's a set of links and a couple different web pages and so on in there. And just above it is a copy of today's slides and a paper that's on this subject. Uh, from a couple of years ago, I was doing a presentation at a technical education conference and talked about the different ways that we can do that. Education has changed because of the advent of the internet. All right, I don't see anybody telling me I've am got sound, so I'm a little bit nervous here. Let me know if I've got the audio on. Let's see, I see a few people typing here. Loud and clear. All right, thanks. Yeah, I'm talking into a microphone and a flat screen here, so it's hard to tell sometimes if it's working. So thanks, John. Appreciate that. All right, well, let's dive into to today's material. And education is a big part of what we do, both receiving and giving educational material and content, whether we're explaining what MTBF is to somebody, and many of you already know my opinion of that, uh, but also how something could fail is a big part of what we do as reliability professionals. And Marcia, I see that your note on the confirmation. Um, the the follow-up messages for this system were kind of wonky about 6 months ago, and I haven't tried it again. I'll give it a try, but if you don't see something in the next day or two, send me an email, and I'll be able to confirm your attendance. That shouldn't be a problem. So one of the things that brings at least me and maybe many others to reliability engineering is I'm curious, and I believe you are too. Uh, we want to know how things work, and then we also want to know why they don't work when they don't work. Unlike me when I was young, and this isn't a picture of me, but very similar, is that my parents would regularly find old appliances and old equipment, and including a typewriter at one point, and give me a set of tools to take it apart. And so maybe they were trying to uh, uh, give me something to do rather than taking apart working equipment. I'm not sure, but I sure was curious. And it it like in this picture, I'd had no idea how this thing really worked or what all these different bits and parts were. But it was fun seeing what was inside of it. And I'm not sure if you did this or not, but it's just a part of the curiosity, which I think is a part of being a good engineer in general, and it does serve us well as a reliability professional. The other note, I've been informally tracking the number of people looking to get hired, and a number of people looking for work, versus the number of people looking to hire somebody. I get calls almost every day from headhunters and recruiters, from companies and clients that are trying to hire somebody. And I roughly it's a precursor to the way the economy works. Over the last 20 years or so, I've been in positions where I tend to be a central spot in knowing what's going on in the industry. And when I start getting more people asking to get to looking for work, it's usually not that far afterwards that the economy starts to decline and more companies are laying people off. And It was about 6 months ahead of the 2008 downturn in the US economy. And more recently, it's been a little bit slower. I've not seen as many people hiring. In the US, there seems to be plenty of activity. People are really looking for new reliability engineers or experienced engineers. But the rest of the world seems to be slowing down a little bit. But in general, companies are starting to recognize that reliability engineering adds a lot of value to their product or process, or whether you're in asset management or creating consumer products and pretty much everything in between. The There was an article in the Wall Street Journal, I think it was Wall Street Journal or one of the national publications, that was talking about companies are finding that creating reliable products is actually good for business. And surprise, surprise there. So it is actually a good time to be a reliability engineer. The industry is starting to recognize that it's actually pretty useful to have this set of skills and incorporate it within their organization. And the other part is there is so much information. And one of the things I like, and I've said this many times, is one of the things I really like about reliability engineering is that if I pick up a book from the 1960s on, say, physics of failures or basic Weibull analysis, it is as true as then as it is today. Now, today we have better failure analysis tools and techniques. We have better communication tools and techniques. We can more sensors and ways to monitor stuff. But the basic technology and math that goes behind reliability engineering hasn't changed all that dramatically. Our ability to execute is improved dramatically, but uh, Weibull statistics really hasn't changed. We might be able to use computer simulations more efficiently than we could have back in the 60s, but we've got a lot of information. If you have a question on, say, a peculiar failure mechanism or a corrosion uh, particle that you see, we have the tools to break that down and understand exactly what was going on. And plus, within the day, you could probably find a technical paper or 20 on the subject if you have access to a decent library. The capabilities today are unmatched of anything we've seen in history. So, get my cursor to work here. Oh, too fast. So, let's do a quick poll. How did you become a reliability engineer? And some of you, no doubt, have gone, and I recognize a handful of folks that have been in university programs. You've gone through a a master's or a PhD program and have a title basically from your education, your formal education as the reliability engineer. Some of you, like I was basically tapped on the shoulder and said, "Poof, you're now the reliability engineer. Go figure out how long this will last, or go do these tasks." And then other people, it's yeah, trained on the job. It's part of it is that you it's just you're an electrical engineer or a polymer engineer or a scientist or you're a program manager, and this reliability stuff just needs to get done. Yeah. So yeah, Yvette and Sean, I find that, and this is my opinion, and you might agree, is that when you come to reliability engineering, because it's seen as valuable and you've got a knack for the statistics involved, um, you actually bring in your other experience, whether in my case I was a manufacturing engineer, that you understand what the other side of the equation is. Whereas you come out of school, you may or may not have that experience of what the design engineer and in product development or asset management is all about. And so there's lots of different ways to do it. Yeah, and there's lots of different paths, and I don't think there's a right way or wrong way. But what does occur is that you're expected to know a whole lot of information. And In most of the cases, it's, well, let's get a book, let's go to a conference, let's get some information, and let's get started with that. Let's see. I had a poll here. Let me try this, see how it works. It's a little bit small on my screen, but hopefully you can see that. Um, so how did you how do you access or find educational material? Looks like the question got pulled off a little bit there. So you can pick as many as you want, but there's formal courses like in a hotel room or at a university. Then there's online courses. We'll talk some more about those. There's reading books. I'm sitting in my library basically. I have a couple of bookcases in here, or online. Different ways to do that. In person, going to conferences like RAMS conference. The RAMS conference is coming up in a couple of weeks. The reliability conference from Reli is coming up in a few weeks, uh, or online like today's. Yeah, lots of reading. So the online reading or books and so on seems to dominate. Hopefully you can see the results here. We've got around 80% of you have done reading, and a bit less on courses and online courses, that kind of stuff. And kind of in the middle, 60, 70% of you are at conferences, workshops, seminars. All of you have been at this webinar, so that's one that's probably should be at 100%, but that's all right. All right, thanks. Let me go back to the presentation. So formal education, it's in some of the students that I have when I teach at the University of Maryland, one course in their master's program, and every year I have a couple of students that are working professionals that have been sent to the university to get their degree, and they're there full time. Now that's pretty sweet. That's a pretty good deal. Now they owe the organization some time. There's a commitment involved for the education, uh, but they get to keep the education even after they've finished their obligation to the organization. But there's many other education outlets for formal programs, and there's University of Tennessee's has got one that's on more on asset management and maintenance engineering. There's universities in Australia and China and Europe. They're all over the world, and there's varying degrees with varying different kinds of focuses. Uh, and there's lots of ways you can go back to school. I know firsthand at University of Maryland that some of my students really never go to campus. You're taking all of the courses online. Well over half of my students there um, never come to campus. They are remote students and they're taking a certificate program or they're taking a master's program, and there's no requirement for them to actually take a class on campus. All of the courses they require to take are available online, and they get all of the features of it except to be in the same room, and so they can view the recordings or the lessons live, or they can review them remotely on their own schedule. So that works out pretty good. Yeah, and Stefan, I agree with you. Is that it's an evolutionary process. What we learn, it may start with this formal education, yet given the nature of our field and the systems where materials we're working with, is we need to continue to learn. But formal education now is starting to evolve. And I'm signed up for a course with edx.org. It's free. You can pay for it to get a certificate, although I'm not really sure what to do with that. Apparently, it's suitable for framing. But and Alfredo, I'll have to dig more into the Bolivar, Bolivar, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right, University and their master's program, and get it added to the list. I keep track of the different programs and try to make those available to everybody so you know what's out there. But I'd like to add to that list is all of these different university level courses that are very well put together and taught from EDX. I'm taking one now on leadership in engineering, and I think it's through I want to say uh, Delft University, which I think is out of Europe. I've taken courses on statistics from Berkeley. There's a whole range of different courses on technical subjects and on very interesting engineering and non-engineering courses, but taught by universities and professors from around the world. I actually took one from EDX that was on wine tasting and learned way more about what goes into the flavor of a glass of wine than I ever thought possible. But got deep into the chemistry type stuff. But Udemy and Coursera also offer courses. Some are at many of these are have some fee or price. A friend of ours in our industry, James, has put a course up. I think it's on Udemy that talks about maintenance planning and scheduling, and is, from what I understand, is doing pretty well. So you may find subjects that are germane to the questions you have, and are available more and more on these online class platforms. I've been a fan of lynda.com because I've been learning how to use different software packages, primarily the Adobe software packages like Photoshop and other packages for Illustrator or Captivate, which is an education platform. I can learn as I need when I need to. And many of you are familiar with AscendoReliability.com, which is a site that I'm putting together with a handful of colleagues and peers to provide educational opportunities, reading material and resources and so on, so that you have access to stuff that's really in the heart of what you need. And so that site is about 6 months old now. Excuse me, and it seems to be doing pretty well. I'm getting a lot of interest and a lot of traffic on that site, and I'm working pretty hard to get it all put together, though. Still working on it. Right. That's just one example of how the online and the internet has changed education. Is we don't have to. Uh, I remember in the university I went to for my undergraduate degree, is one of the rules. They had three basic rules from the early days of the university. It was one is you were not allowed to be married, and you were not allowed to have a mustache, and you were not allowed to have a horse. And and when you went to the university, you were there. I think it was 3 years before the first time that you were basically allowed to go back home. So it was a major commitment, and but our transportation and communication systems have changed dramatically. Whereas now, like at University of Maryland, you can get your degree and never appear on the campus. Yeah, you miss some of the campus activities and life that goes on there, uh, but it sure can fit into the schedule that you have and make it accessible. Now, many of you mentioned that you are learning through reading. There are recently I was on Amazon. I was looking for a handful of resources for some books, and a couple of the books were at 1 cent. It cost $2 for shipping, and there was a handful of those and a variety of interesting books. A couple of them I actually was looking for, so I ordered about a dozen books at basically $2 each, and that was pretty cool. And I'm going back through these older books, and there's a lot of good information in them. Some not so much, but by and large, that was there. Uh, Journals, magazines, and trade journals, magazines, every month or every week or every quarter come out and have uh, academic research and papers, case studies, um, insights, how-tos, all kinds of different articles. And many of them, especially trade journals, are be are publishing just online. I recently, a few years ago, I should say, is the Quality Digest magazine is gone just electronic, and a handful of other magazines are doing so likewise. But it doesn't stop there. Newspapers like the Wall Street Journal and news magazines like Time are also have interesting information that is relevant for business and for the goings-ons of organizations that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. So I think I'm preaching to the choir here is that it's read and read widely, read a lot. There's nothing wrong with that. And the other part, the other note I have here to myself is basically all of these periodicals basically are looking for good authors, looking for people to write for them, looking for contributions of technical papers and how to or case study type stuff. So you know, it may take a little bit of time to organize your thoughts and get it down on paper, uh, but it's a great way to get published and help share what you know with other people. Another way today is blogs, websites, wiki pages. There's there's kind of a joke in my house anyway, is that, oh, I saw it on the internet, it must be true. Um, yeah, you need to find good sources. You need to find elements that check out or are consistent or make sense or have good references that you can check and so on. Yeah, YouTube is another great source. I just saw your note, Stefan. But in reading, um, you can subscribe through the Real Simple Syndication, RSS, or through email lists, or you can just visit these different sites. You can do a Google search, and pretty much any phrase or an internet search, I should say, to be non-denominational, and you can find somebody has written about that topic more than likely. So, how do I analyze a Weibull plot? Or how do I create one? There's probably dozens of articles and papers and presentations available online to talk you through that or help you get sorted and do that. I should make a plug here. If you're interested in writing a blog post about reliability engineering, let me know. Accendo Reliability has the article section, and we're actively looking for guest posts or for regular contributors for that site. The but reading is hasn't gone away. That's the same as it's been for hundreds and hundreds of years that there's published material available. It's just that there's so much available now that's not necessarily ink on paper. More and more, it's pixels on a screen. Oops. And then presentations. We've been talking to our peers um, in the professional sense for a couple of hundred years. I'm thinking of professional societies like uh, the um, the Royal Societies in England back in the 1700s, 1800s. I'm drawing a blank on what the Royal Scientific Societies. I'm drawing a blank on, and then formal names of a couple of those. But they would get together on a regular basis and share what they've learned and share the knowledge that they had. And eventually that turned into periodicals and technical journals that we still have available today in many different cases. If you look back at one of your favorite technical journals, it probably goes back decades and decades, if not 100 years in some cases. But there's conferences and technical papers available for all kinds of different disciplines, whether it's technical marketing or electrical engineering and reliability engineering. There's all kinds of these different groups that have come together to essentially just share ideas. The RAMS that conference is the Reliability and Maintainability Symposium. That's in about 2 weeks, I think it is. It's usually the last week in January, and I'll be doing a tutorial with Carl Carlson there on reliability engineering management. Plus, I'm doing a paper about how do you set the reliability goal for drones, kind of a case study kind of paper. And if you're planning on attending RAMS, let me know, and we should arrange to have some time to sit down and talk and talk shop to some extent. Find out. Well, I'm interested in finding out what you do and how I can help you with that through the Ascendos reliability site. But there's conferences in Europe and in Asia. There's uh, conferences organized by professional societies. There's conferences organized by private parties or trade journals or by software companies. ARS is, you know, largely sponsored by Reliasoft, and they do symposiums around the world. But there's a big advantage to a conference is that you get this influx of a large number of different ideas and topics presented all within a condensed few days usually. Now, more and more though, the same kind of information is become available through webinars. The this series, the Ascendo Reliability webinar series, is an example. The ASQ Reliability Division has been going now for I think 5 years, if I think right, if I remember right. Last time I saw the metrics, they had well over 30,000, 20 to 30,000 unique attendees to their webinars. They've had uh, at least 12, usually around 15 presentations per year. And more recently, they're getting much more stable with they have an English series, there's a Chinese language series that's aimed at the Chinese speaking market, and there's becoming more and more regular is the Spanish language series. And so they've recognized that reliability is not just an English language event. But there's also private organizations like Hobbs Engineering. Virginia runs a program that has, for a fee, usually very informative and impactful, longer webinar sessions than an hour, but lots of good info in them. And has, I think she's got like maybe 10 or so different engineers that regularly present. But it's really just a business that's providing reliability education. DFR Solutions is a consultancy and engineering services company that supports the reliability world. And they regularly do webinars as a way to talk about reliability topics and demonstrate the type of knowledge they have in their organization. Now, I heard a strange beep there, so I'm wondering if that, hopefully it's still working. It still looks like I'm broadcasting on this end. But there's a, still working, thanks, Sean. Uh, on webinars, and I'm sure many of you that are on today's session have seen the listing for upcoming webinars that my wife and I put together. And it talks about, all we do is look for webinars from all different sources and add them to a list. And it just puts, I don't know, sometimes there's a dozen or so different events in the next month. And you can find that listing under the Ascendo Reliability under the calendar section. There's upcoming webinars, and you can sign up for it there if you're not on it. But the idea is that it's basically a ongoing conference that's available worldwide through these webinars. And many of them are recorded so that if you can't make the live event, you can see it afterwards. Unlike a conference where if you miss the session, you may be able to read the paper or view the slides, but as you know, it's not quite the same as being involved with it directly. So conferences, to a large degree, I think, are being supplemented by webinars. And I think that's one of the big changes in the way we're learning about engineering. Now, of course, there's courses. Used to be like the university courses, but there's also been workshops and seminars and day-long sessions, and some were organized inside organizations, some were organized by for-profit organizations. And to a large extent, besides reading, that's how I really learned about reliability engineering is I went and took a week-long course on reliability statistics, for example, learn the basics and learn the different tools that were available there. But it was in a hotel conference room, and uh, it was an immersion in a particular topic. Now, I didn't use everything that was in that course immediately when I got back to work. But over time, these different courses just, excuse me, added to the body of knowledge that I could draw from and increased awareness, increased the tool sets and problem solving capabilities, and so on. But today, those same courses are often available online, on demand, or live. So, courses like the CRE prep course, I've been teaching with the local ASQ section here in Silicon Valley. And we've taught that course online. So it's 2 hours twice a week for 8 weeks. Uh, Yet, the first time we did it, we had students from the Middle East and from Europe and from Australia, uh, from around the world, which wasn't going to be practical for them to commute to San Jose twice a week for 8 weeks to take that course otherwise. So the reach for providing courses and seminars has improved dramatically. And our online tools like GoToMeeting and WebEx and Adobe Connect and other tools really make this very, very possible. So, and it's just getting um, better and better and better. The types of courses, the breadth of courses, the ability of these courses online to create uh, meaningful learning experiences continues to improve. Matter of fact, I just saw an email this morning from EDX where there's a course through MIT about education technology, and in the abstract talks about using today's technology and the best learning algorithms or techniques or approaches and putting those together. So I'm looking forward to taking that course to learn more about providing, well, in my case, reliability education to people like you. So hopefully I can find some ways to improve what I'm doing and make it more effective. So I think I've mentioned the meetings before, but the beyond the conferences and trade journals or technical journals and so on, professional societies also hold evening meetings, at least in my area, and I know in many areas around the world. Those old royal societies, that was their whole idea, is they would get together and have a meeting. Eventually, that evolved into conferences, but at first it was every Tuesday night, 7 to 9 o'clock. Somebody's going to talk about their research. So local meetings have a long history, and it provides a great way to hear one or two presentations about some topic, but more importantly, to network, to rub elbows with people that have similar interests and are in different companies, different organizations, but with very similar types of issues that they're dealing with. So these evening meetings, and it depends on where you live, if they're available or if they're convenient to get to. I know in Houston, they had there's a number of different professional societies and reliability that hold meetings, but one of the uh, obstacles is that the city is so large that it may take an hour to get to the meeting, and that's still within the city limits of Houston. So there's lots of hurdles to doing the live evening meetings. And I know firsthand because I ran one of the groups here in the Bay Area for a number of years. But we also do it within organizations. I remember when I was first a manufacturing engineer, about once a quarter we would get together, all of the engineers and technicians and our management team would get together, and we would each talk about the projects we were working on or the research we were doing to improve the plant. And we would just share what we knew. And in some regards, we got some review out of it, but more importantly is we got to know what everybody else was doing and also learned quite a bit that way. Yeah. And Bart, you're exactly right. Um, there is a lot of uh, material available for how to do webinars, how to do online courses, how to use these various tools. There's a training network, and there's a couple other professional societies focused just on training, professional development training. And if you send me an email, I can send you a couple of the links to those sites where you can find out all kinds of cool stuff. And what's the ongoing research in those areas and what's working and what's not working. And Greg, I saw your note on MOOCs. I, I've heard that pronounced a number of different ways. Massive online open courses. That's what I mean to by those EDX and those kinds of things. And the, I don't. I'm trying to remember if it was EDX or if it was Corsair that has a really interesting looking series on R programming, which is a great software package for doing data analysis. See if I can get my, oops, that's not my email. Um, Pardon me while I think about typing rather than, there we go. I think that's it. I might have actually spelled reliability wrong. I've taught my spell checker about a dozen ways to spell it wrong. But at FMS at FMS reliability, and I got your message, Bart. So the um, uh, recently I saw an ad from Stanford. They're not part of the EDX program, but they offer a free course from uh, two of the pioneers in statistical software development uh, and they have a course on data analysis with R. Rob Tibershariam, I'm sure I'm not pronouncing his last name correctly, is one of the guys that basically invented software statistics packages, way back at Bell Labs, and has been involved with its development ever since, and is now a professor at Stanford. But they're offering a series of free courses on using statistical software package called R to do data analysis. And it, if nothing else, it gives you a sense of what's possible with those packages. There's so many different people and so many different ways to share information. And what's really fortunate is so many people are doing so. And so you could spend full time doing nothing but learning, which probably wouldn't be useful. We've got to actually get some work done on occasion. But the what you can get to more recently, if you are in an area that doesn't have local professional meetings or presentations and discussion meetings, is you can do that online. There's discussion forums and groups and all kinds of information on different websites that have comments sections and discussion ability linked into them. LinkedIn groups has been one of the more active areas for reliability from a group called Reliability Success, which I think has got close to 50,000 members to it. But there's also groups by industry. I know there's active groups for the railroad industry and another for oil and gas industry with the focus on reliability. And so do a quick search. You can find more different topics and forums for people that have similar interests and various levels of expertise. And what I found is that if you like the CRE preparation group in the LinkedIn groups, if you post a question there about trying to solve a problem uh, from the CRE's body of knowledge, is you'll probably get two or three different responses about ways to solve that problem or different references to help you uh, sort it out for yourself. But there's an advantage that when you have a question, instead of just asking one or two people, is these forums and groups allow you to ask hundreds of people simultaneously, and then those with some knowledge in the area or a willingness to help can provide some answers. So I remember being in a part of a group that was a paper newsletter, and they had a Q&A section, and they would post. It's like a journal that has a comments page or letters to the editor pages. So I gave it a try once. I had a question that maybe this group could help me with. So I wrote it up and sent it to the editor, and it took 4 months before it was published. So the turnaround time today is it's not instant, yet within a day or two, you can probably get some really good information to help you solve your particular question or problem. And so I think that's one of the biggest changes that we've seen. Now, we've also, I've talked about these different technologies and links and all kinds of different sources that many of you are already very familiar with, and tried to highlight some of the various changes. But the basic thing is that where do we get reliability engineers, right? It's really from us ourselves being curious. We find either that we're assigned to this task and we have a talent for it, or we're interested in that area. But I think what makes reliability engineering so much fun, at least for me, and maybe for you too, is that you get to learn a lot. And it's new materials, it's new structures, it's new use conditions, it's new ways of doing failure analysis, new ways to do product testing, and that list just keeps going on. We get to deal with the same basic structure of answering the questions of how long will something last and how will it break, how will it fail, but we use all kinds of different tools and techniques to get there. And so, at least in my experience, working with medical devices or with aerospace devices, the basic questions are the same. Our fundamental approach is, well, what's the risk? How do I quantify it? How do I make sure we got the right design? Whereas in mechanical engineering or electrical engineering or different types of product developments, different industries have some very fundamentally different approaches and tools and techniques. I know there's plenty of similarities across industries in these other disciplines. Yet, I think reliability has the advantage that we get to span all of those different disciplines, plus bring to the table what we know about reliability. So I think that's so. Let's open it up for a little discussion. I've got a few minutes left here, about 15 minutes or so, and I've seen plenty of chat. So, what's your favorite way to learn these days? Are you looking to go back to school, or do you have a great resource that you would like to recommend and let everybody else know about it? Or what are you looking for? What's missing uh, from our education portfolio that you're looking for and would really like to see? All right, don't be shy. There we go. More formal education. What do you mean by formal, Sean? Is the university level type where you for a degree? Yeah. All right. Um, if you look at reliabilitycalendar.org, under the menu item called higher ed, higher education, there's a list of, I think it's about a dozen programs, and I need to add the one mentioned in the chat window here earlier. and put it together there. There's lots of different programs available, and I'm learning about more on an ongoing basis and adding them. I don't know what the application is for University of Maryland. The online, I think it's pretty traditional for um, universities. It's kind of the application process is now for students starting in the spring. I'm not that involved with the admissions process or all that kind of stuff. I only teach one class, and so I don't get too terribly involved in all of that. Uh, but you could find out more quick enough at University of Maryland graduate program. Uh, in the course I teach is through the mechanical engineering department in the Clark School of Engineering, and there's also a CALS, the um, that has its own program. It's a consortium basically, and funded by private research dollars basically, and they have their own program too. Yeah, statistical methods, Yvette. There's um, EDX, and I don't know if it's still available or when it's going to run again. Had a three credit hour courses, three graduate level sequence of courses through or Berkeley, University of California in Berkeley. And I thought it was awesome. It was a really good introduction to basic statistics. Uh, then the reliability part, um, I don't, other than like University of Maryland and the different reliability programs through universities, I don't know of any that are available on EDX or Coursera and those kinds of places. I know that I'm working on courses like that. A reliability statistics course is in my list of courses to offer through Ascendo. So I'm glad to hear that. But R programming, you can certainly see that through EDX, through Stanford, and these other massive open online courses. There's lots of different stuff like that. More information about the classes I offer are through ascendoreliability.com and look under courses. There's a course that's open anytime. Anybody that's on the member of the site, which is free, is I think it's titled 14 Ways to Learn Reliability Engineering, and there's just tons of links and pointers to the stuff that's available to us as reliability professionals. And then there's a course that I'm going to launch, I hope later this week. I expect to launch later this week on the CRE preparation course. It's going to be online and on demand. So I have just completed I think the 90-second lecture, and they're 5 minutes. I think one or two of them are up to 20 minutes, but mostly like 10-minute segments on specific topics from the CRE body of knowledge. And so and I, the map I've got or the plan I've got has got 170 lectures that cover engineering management to systems engineering to reliability statistics, uh, uh, control charts, design of experiments, hypothesis testing, Weibull analysis, all those kinds of things, plus the design elements, maintenance availability, data use, all those different parts of the body of knowledge. And that course is going to go live here in about a week, and you can find more info about it on the Ascendo Reliability site under courses. Then there's my intention is to break that course out and add more depth, like just on reliability statistics, and make those available. Plus, if you look under the podcast section of the site, the previous webinars are available. In a couple of those, I've talked about some of these topics that people have been mentioning. But also ASQ's reliability division now has, I think they have over 100 different webinars recorded and available. And if you become a member of their site, which I think is only $10 or $20, you have access to hundreds of hours of webinars, and you can search those for the topics you're most interested in. Yeah, and Yvette, I agree that Udemy is really pretty cool. It's usually a very focused topic or discussion on a specific subject, and usually very practical, at least the courses I've seen. So Adam, looking for stuff on design for reliability methods. Um, yeah, other than even in the formal uh, courses, the ones, at least the courses I'm familiar with at the University of Maryland, there's a lot about the tools and statistics that go into reliability engineering. There is a course on design for reliability, but I've had a few students tell me that it's not all that practical. So I don't know a lot about it. So I really shouldn't say anything one way or the other. But I agree with you. There's not a lot of material available on DFR methods other than in the books. Like Practical Reliability Engineering is a pretty decent book that covers many of those topics. Yeah. Neil, one of the things that's hard to do is, well, what's the value of a conference? It's going to cost me a week of time, airfare, hotel, meals, plus just not at work for the week. And I come back and I've got lots of ideas, lots of info, lots of papers to follow up on. But how do I prove that going to the conference was valuable? Now, this was a challenge my boss gave me when I used to work at Hewlett Packard. He says, yeah, you want to go to this conference, but what do I get for it? What's the company get for it? And so we worked out a way to demonstrate the value of getting education. And so part of it, if you think through it, is all I need is one idea that saves us, $658,000, and it's more than paid for the conference. Maybe I am more efficient at doing something. Instead of taking 2 days to do an analysis, it takes me 2 hours. Well, if I do that analysis every month, that adds up in very short order to be a lot of money, and so on. And so all it takes is getting a handful of ideas that you can document to show that it's going to the conference was the source of the change. And but you have to pay attention to what's changed. That's the hard part. So what we started doing back then was that when people went to conferences, instead of asking, so what did you learn? We would follow up with them and say, what are you going to do different? What are you going to do based on the information you picked up at the conference? And then follow up then 2 or 3 months after that to say, what actually worked? So you said you were going to, with this idea, you were going to save time on this analysis. Well, how much time did you actually save? And then document it. Instead of asking, were the lights good? Was the food good? Were the presenters, speakers turned on? Those kinds of things, which is important, but that's not why we're there. Instead, ask, what are you going to do different? And then follow up with, did you do something different and how did it turn out? That's how you find the value of training. Learning how to educate and communicate as engineers. Yeah, and Bart, you'd asked the question earlier, or I think it was you, about training information and so on. The Nancy Durante um, does professional presentations. I think she was the organization behind a lot of Steve Jobs presentations, for example. But she offers a bunch of material on her site, and it's Nancy Durante. Let's see, I think that's how it's spelled. Might have an extra A in there. I'm not sure. But she's behind a couple of different books about crafting presentations, which goes a long way to educational pieces, is making them engaging and making presentations and material engaging and insightful and valuable, those kinds of things, memorable. Uh, uh, Training magazine, there's Training Insights, is I think one of the newsletters I get. Training Network are a couple different organizations that provide regular ongoing webinar series about training, about providing online material, and whether it's live or asynchronous. And so there's a lot of great information about how to do that. Now, the other one is in general for engineers that we as a group are really poor communicators. So look for a book called Smart Work by Friedman. I think that's her name. I want to say Lucy Friedman. Smart Work by Lucy Friedman. And it talks about the basics of communicating as an engineer is working with other people. So it helps in meetings or in presentations when you're live with somebody, but a lot of the same material also works with um, uh, um, uh, creating a presentation or creating a report. The There's a whole field called neural linguistic programming, which is kind of a mouthful of a of a abbreviation, um, but it talks about the nuances of how we communicate, and being aware of those techniques allows you to be better at it and pay attention to who you're trying to communicate with. And so there's tons of information available on that also. But the basic idea of the old saw of tell them what you're going to tell them what you told them is only one approach to presentations or education or so on. And there's many, many others. And the tools we have available today are making so many different ways so much more important, or possible, I should say. Yeah, train the trainer in tech. Ray, so what made him so useful? What stood out as why those things were useful for you? I'm trying to catch up with some of the other notes that have gone by here. Oh, so uh, V2, I saw your note about the specs and standards and so on. Um, you know, and this is really my opinion, is that standards are a starting point. They're created by a group of people that come to a consensus about what they agree they do. They rarely create breaking or useful or best practices by consensus. And it's what's the minimum level standard that we can all agree to is seems to be, in my opinion, what comes out of standards. It's a starting point. So if you're in a consumer market and you're trying to create, well, what should I do to evaluate my product from a reliability point of view? Well, is that's the reliability program. What's the risk? What's going to break? What's the cost per risk? And then what's the right investment to make sure that we don't cross that line? Standards can give you an idea of where to look and types of things that other people have seen in similar circumstances, but they're not using your materials, your design, and your customers. So you really need to create those internally. So, for example, I was working with the team that was making the first for their product line a handheld microphone, a wireless microphone for gameplay. It was a game controller, and so we just did a FMEA essentially and sorted out all of the various risks. And one of the obvious ones is that it would be dropped, it would be stepped on, it would be sat on, it would be thrown, and all the different scenarios that would lead to stress being applied to the product. So we went away and created a number of different test algorithms to evaluate those. Many of those were just checking what kind of margin over what kind of loads that we were expecting, and was it safe? And some of them, like drop testing, was we knew it was going to get dropped multiple times every day of use. So, well, how many drops could it go to? So, test to failure. So, we looked at different standards and different techniques for hardnesses of surfaces and what kind of flooring was available in North America or in Europe, those kinds of pieces of information. But if we would have used just a consumer product standard, say from IEC or from IEEE, to evaluate this product, it would have said drop it 10 times at random from 4 feet onto a concrete floor. And if it still works, you're good. Well, was that good enough? Was that accounting for accumulated damage? Was that accounting for the way this product was used? No. So we went well beyond using the standard right away. So let's see, good editor. Yeah, Ray, I actually hired an editor to help me with course material and a couple of books that I'm working on. And I have learned so much. It's also a humbling experience when you get it back the first time. But over time, I've gotten better and better and in my writing. But more importantly, is that the editor keeps me honest and keeps my writing clear, which is really the objective to it. So that's a great, yeah. But it's also very, very useful. Yeah, and the train the trainer stuff. Yeah, not to use passive voice. I totally agree. All right, well, we're up against the hour. I'm going to stay online and track down any of these other notes, and I'm going to take some notes myself on some of the links and some of the references that you provided. So I appreciate that, and we'll add it to the notes. So thanks for signing in today. Watch for announcements for the CRE prep course, which should be coming out this week on the Ascendo reliability site. And we'll see you next month. And once again, I've left myself short of not leaving myself a note as to what the course is for next month. Um, but you'll see it on, or what the webinar is next month, but we'll look for that. So thanks again. Appreciate everybody joining me today.